Thanks for joining me. It's good to see you. Nintendo just premiered their Direct and shared quite a bit of information with us. I want to take a look at the Pokemon Legends Z-A trailer, but not the one they showed in the Direct. On the Japanese YouTube channel for Pokemon, there is a longer trailer which shows even more very interesting video, so I will link that in the description in case you've missed it, and I will be analyzing this with a fine-toothed comb. If we have not met yet, my name is Jerrel. I develop games for a living. I'm a part-time ranch hand as well. It's nice to spend time outside doing physical work. In this video, I will be approaching the topic as an artist and as a game developer, so I will be sharing my perspective on things that I find interesting, and I will try to help you understand the kind of decisions that artists and developers have to make when they are building a game. I will have some positive things to say about Pokemon, so if you're here to hate on Pokemon, this video will not be interesting to you. I will have some somewhat negative and critical things to say, but they are not negative in the way that, oh, I just want to make fun of this franchise. They are negative in that this is a professional critique, and I will be pointing out aspects that really could be and should be better from an artistic, from a technical standpoint. So my goal really is to help people learn more about game development, but I want to see these games be better. I want to see games be as great as they can be. I want to see developers continue to improve and continue to learn and hone their skills. And it's important to me as a developer and as an artist to keep pushing myself, to keep improving. So I will start at 4 seconds here, and already I think this is so interesting right off the bat here. This is the most interesting shot that I've seen in a Game Freak product. We have interesting use of lighting coming in and casting shadows on the train, but this scene in particular is the most interesting I've seen from Game Freak. We have a shot that starts from the inside of the train and it looks out, and we have foliage that is populated just enough to where there's enough detail to stop the scene from looking boring and plain. But then we see Lumiose in the distance. Something to note here is the draw distance of shadows, and I will try to discuss this throughout the video, is how far are these shadows rendered? You see these shadows here. When it comes to a game engine, rendering shadows is quite costly in terms of the performance budget, your rendering budget. Shadows tend to cost a lot, so they negatively impact the performance. If we were to draw shadows infinitely, not only would it negatively affect the quality of the shadows, but it would negatively affect the frame rate. So we can see, I would estimate, if this were in real life, I would estimate that's about 100 meters away from the camera. That's probably about 220, 240. And the fact that it's drawing here at about 100, I mean, it's better than what it was in Scarlet and Violet. We can say that. I'm going to go ahead and minimize myself so I take up less space in the scene. Now at 7 seconds here, we have a pretty good use of foliage and green to create a more interesting scene. They use the foliage here, these plants climbing up here, the bushes, the trees, and also specifically these little patches of moss or weeds, whatever's coming up through the cracks there. That's a good use of green to break up the dullness of the stone, because the stone, it's quite dull looking. It's just gray. It's very neutral. So not having any other color would make it dull. So that's good use, good consideration there. It breaks up the stone and whatever concrete they have here. I also want to point out, on a personal note, no socks equals no good. You've got to put some socks in there. Those shoes are not going to be good when they come off. You got to have some socks, man. I do like the use of different textures and different types of stone and tile. We have these rigid rectangular stones, and they're broken up by these more organic stones. And then you have this very pattern-focused, ornate tile here, and the fact that they're all broken up, it introduces something visual interest to the scene. Then you have the round shape that they build with the borders here. You have these different shapes that have a lot of imperfections in them. I'll have to get out of the way here. And you can see the difference in specularity between the various stones. That's quite nice to see. And then you have the pavement here. So I think that's good use of different textures to create an interesting scene. I hope the majority of the environments have this sort of consideration when it comes to variety. At 10 seconds here, you can see the culling of real-time shadows. I'm going to make a big deal about the shadows here. You can see this tree casting a shadow. I'll have to get out of the way again. And you can see it's casting a shadow here, but it starts fading away. You can see the shadows fading away. You can see it's fading out, and you can see this tree here is not casting shadows. So those are real-time shadows. It's culling at this distance here. But what is fascinating is that the buildings are still casting shadows. This tells me that the trees, the characters, all cast real-time shadows at probably around 100 meters or so, but these are baked shadows. This is hard-coded into a texture. And you can actually see here it's quite low resolution, which is good because this game looks like it's going to be a large environment. And so when you have a high number of baked textures, that can cause it takes up a lot of memory, and it can also result in memory fragmentation because they have to be quite large. I believe the areas are broken up a fair bit, but because these are baked, they are much less expensive on the rendering budget. Baked shadows don't need to be calculated or computed. They are baked into a texture. They're much cheaper to render, so they can draw they can render the shadows for the buildings much farther away. And if they did not do that, it would look awful. If you look at Scarlet and Violet, you can see the shadows of the buildings fading out, in quite a close distance from the camera. This looks significantly better. So this tells me whoever is on the development team for this game has a much, much stronger understanding of development in a 3D space. Something I want to point out is the walkways. These are not structurally sound. There are no supporting structures underneath it. Once you get to the middle point of this bad boy, that's going to be wobbling, and you know that on a windy day, that's not going to feel right. I mean, where is this even? I would personally wouldn't feel safe traversing on that. It's just not structurally sound. Obviously, that's not a complaint. That's just I think it's just funny. Now, this scene looks good. I think this scene looks good primarily down to a couple different things here. So they've leveraged bake shadows for the buildings so the buildings can render shadows there. It looks good because the horizon line of the sky is quite bright. It's implementing an effect called bloom. Bloom is an effect that it's applied after the scene is rendered, and it just adds a blurry halo where light pixels are right next to darker pixels, and it's adding this nice softness and halo, and it's quite organic looking. It's very pleasing. That's what makes this particular scene look quite nice here. There are also minor details in the distance. For example, you can see a little bit of a hint of trees in the distance, and there's some shape to the geometry here, some form in the landscape here. It's just a hint that there is more than what is traversable and what you can see in the immediate environment. It's those nice details like that that make a scene look nice. Now, at 17 seconds here, I think these could possibly be hologram street signs. You see they aren't physically connected. I think that's kind of neat. Something that's kind of just fun. The use, I believe they've baked ambient occlusion into the textures here to make things visually pop. It gives it more contrast. This is not something that we really saw in Scarlet and Violet. Scarlet and Violet relied heavily on physically based shaders and tried to brute force their way into making things look interesting. But the developers didn't really have a strong understanding of what makes something visually interesting. Whereas these artists working on this do have a stronger understanding. You can see that just in the ambient occlusion here. I believe it's baked in. There's no reason to do that in real time because that has a performance cost. I think they baked that in. It just looks nice. It adds dynamic and contrast to the scene. Very interesting to look at. I believe these clouds are not volumetric or rendered in real time. I believe this is a static texture, and I believe there are two layers. You can see it looks like it's changing a little bit, but I believe there's just two layers that are just static, which is fine. And this looks good. This looks fine. It's certainly better than the clouds in Scarlet and Violet. Now these textures are quite high density in detail. I think that's quite interesting. It's good to see that this quite high density detail. Again, it's a huge improvement over what we've seen in past 3D Pokemon games. Now at 25 seconds here, we can see the shadows being cast from the trees. They're rendered up until about this point here, but it's really hard to tell. But I think we got a better look at it earlier in the trailer. It's quite nice. Now, this is our first look at an indoor area like this, and this is very encouraging to me because we have never gotten an indoor scene that looks interesting like this from Game Freak. In this scene, they are letting the shadows and the darkness be part of the composition of the screen. In previous titles, it's like they're afraid to let scenes have interesting dynamic contrast. Here we have the lights that are quite vibrant and stark, and we have darker areas here. We have what looks like a physically based shader for catching reflections on the pipe here. We have a dead Patrat. This is interesting. This is interesting to me. I would like to see, you don't really see shadows cast from this pipe up there, maybe because of that light source. I would like to see more use of interesting shadows, but at least overall shadow and darkness do get to be part of the scene, which is not something generally that we've seen from Game Freak, and this is a step in the right direction. Absolutely, I would like to see scenes be more interesting and dynamic. There's a distance fog that's implemented. It adds a haziness. It communicates a sense of moisture in the air, some haziness in the atmosphere. It's interesting, and I'm glad to see Game Freak moving towards more interesting composition for their environments. This logo looks so wet. That is the wettest looking logo that I've ever seen. Now the depth of field. Depth of field is a photographic effect that blurs the background and keeps the foreground in focus. In general, you want to keep that, you can render that effect at lower resolution to save your performance, because that has a very high performance cost, especially on the Switch. Depth of field is very expensive on the rendering. But here it's quite high resolution. This is on the Switch 2, which to me tells me they've most likely optimized the effect to be lower resolution to run well on Switch, while on Switch 2, this effect can run at a higher resolution. That's what I hope is happening. That's what I believe is happening, and I'm very glad to see that. I really hope that the Switch 2 version is not just a copy-paste version. I want to see considerations like this where the post-screen effects are higher quality and higher resolution. I think that's what I see. There's a little bit of a chromatic aberration effect where there's a distortion of the color of pixels between the dark and the light, which is very good. It adds a sense of organic feel to the world, because that's how we see things through cameras. I believe that the depth of field effect, the blurring, is applied after the bloom. And the reason I see that is there's quite a uniform blur here. There's a uniform blurring. So I believe bloom was added, is processed before depth of field here. It's not really, it's not important or that interesting. I do like the use of the crawling vines, but there are parts of the environment of the city that look extremely plain, and they would benefit from placement of these crawling vines. But this is something that must be done manually. Whoever's building the environments has to place these by hand, and that takes some time. But I would like to see them spend more time placing that, because there's parts of this game that look very dull based on the trailers, and I hope that they will implement more of this stuff, because this makes the environments look interesting, and I'm worried that maybe they didn't do that much. The indoor scenes look nice. They're significantly better than what we've seen in previous games, especially Sword and Shield. I can do a comparison in a different video. We'll do a ball check here. This is a dive ball. Ball check. Ball check. Dive ball. That's one of my favorite ones. I like the color. Really cool. She sends out a Starmie, And I really, really like the shader that they've used for the reflective part. If this were Sword and Shield, they would try to make this look, you know, very metallic and reflective and kind of realistic. And I do like that. I really like the way that Scarlet and Violet looks when it comes to the Pokemon. But I really like the aesthetic they've chosen for this game, which is closer to the anime look. And I really like the reflective look to Starmie here. It's just really cool. It gives it that hand-drawn feel, and it makes me not expect as much when it comes to realism and not having hyper detailed. So I think I prefer these kind of visuals over Scarlet and Violet, which is, you know, it's kind of a big deal for me because I really like the way that the Pokemon look in Scarlet and Violet. Now this is a scene, this is probably the best composed scene that I've ever seen from Game Freak. There is a design philosophy I refer to as breaking the line, whether that comes to building an environment in a game or creating a painting or composing a photo, is having straight lines, having plain lines. It's the most boring thing in the world visually. And it's a huge problem with 3D Pokemon games, especially Sword and Shield, especially Scarlet and Violet. There is no understanding of that concept. Other games that I've covered recently exhibit a strong understanding of that concept of breaking the line, and Pokemon Game Freak has never had that understanding, but until now. I'm looking at the scene. Let's look at the vertical lines of this border. Here it's broken up by the chairs. The vertical lines of these walls here are even broken up by the placement of these paintings. Like that's a little off center that's going on there. On the table here we have vertical lines that are broken up by the papers, the teacup, the pen is intersecting with that line, the bread is intersecting with that line. The objects are off at different angles, so it has an organic feeling. If this were Sword and Shield, this would be placed like a 2D game. Everything would be rigid and straight, and it would look like everything is tile-based. Sword and Shield has an extremely synthetic, inorganic, artificial look because it was created as if it were composed in RPG Maker, where everything is just a flat 2D tile along a very specific set of coordinates. This does not have that problem. We even have some sort of coffee maker here that breaks up that line on that wall there. This is still not amazing when we compare it to other games in the monster catching genre, especially ones that I've been looking at recently and creating videos on. This is still not anywhere near as good as those, but it's excellent for Game Freak and excellent for Pokemon. This is a huge step in the right direction. I hope they keep moving towards scenes like this. Here's an excellent, let me just get out of here. Again, a strong understanding of breaking the line. We have straight lines on the piece of furniture here. We've broken that line by having a terracotta pot there that breaks up the lines. The lines of the ground of the tiles are broken up by these pots, by that tile that's off at an angle. The straight lines of the background are broken up by the crawling plants. Well done, well done. This looks way better than what we've seen in the past for Game Freak. I'm glad to see that. At 37, this scene is interesting. This, again, is an example of significantly more comprehensive understanding of composing an interesting scene. Compare this to any indoor area from Sword and Shield or Scarlet and Violet. You'll see a stark difference. I don't think this is even the same people composing these scenes because this has a significantly stronger understanding. All of our lines, basically, our lines are broken up. We've broken the line basically at every possible point here. The corner of this room is broken up by this plant. It's broken it in two ways there. We have this round rug here that offsets the angular linearity of the room here, especially when it comes to the hardwood tiles here. The round rug offsets that. We have the round table with the legs that intersect that. And we have all different kinds of furniture. Artistically, I would say this represents a sense of ragtagness, of a little bit of whimsy, because they're all different chairs. It's not matching furniture. If this were Sword and Shield, you know that they would have copy and pasted the same chair over and over again. It would have looked very plain. this has a very coherent color palette to this room. I originally had complaints that I had written down, that I'm looking at my notes here, and I'm going to dispute myself on that now. Originally, I was going to say there's not enough interest, there's not enough dynamic in terms of colors, but I'm looking at this now. Overall, this is quite a coherent scene. There's no clashing colors. If this were Scarlet and Violet, there would probably be some vibrant clashing of colors with little cohesion. The only thing that I dislike about this particular scene is the lack of color representation and color cohesion. For example, there's this sort of harsh blue that doesn't really correspond with anything else in this scene. We have these nice vibrant greens outside, but it doesn't have any matching representation anywhere else in the scene. And then we have this, which is kind of flesh toned. If we take a look, I don't want to keep comparing this to other things and say this other thing is better, but there are other monster raising games that are coming up within the same month as this game, and if you look at the indoor scenes of that, they are composed with very strong cohesion, with color representation that has very dynamic scenes, great use of lighting. I would have liked to see volumetric lighting with light shafts coming in through the windows. That would have looked absolutely fantastic here. And it's not about realism, it's not about quantity, it's about expression and what you are saying, how you are saying it. And having light shafts coming in would have just been really nice, just a nice touch. But I think this scene, this is excellent for Game Freak. This is a huge, huge step up for them. Okay. Let's see here. I believe these are baked shadows. You can achieve this either with real-time ambient occlusion that's processed after the fact, but that has a performance cost. I think perhaps it is, because we see a little bit of that there, or it can be baked into the texture. This is well considered and well done. This is not something that Scarlet and Violet or Sword and Shield would have done. They would have let the engine do all the work, and it would have looked quite flat. This is a decision they've made to make it darker within the folds of that, and it makes the scene look interesting. I see things like this, and I see that these developers have a much stronger understanding of what they're doing in terms of visuals. I'm glad to see that. Sunset Time has the most interesting visuals because of the ambient lighting, and the color tones are quite interesting. The lighting angle here makes no sense. At sunset time, the sun would be quite lower. We would have longer shadows, but we can see the sun is still basically directly above the character, which means that they probably didn't consider the direction of the sun. It would have introduced significantly more interesting lighting. And it's a real shame that the sun is at a high position for the sunset time. It's a little bit of a bummer. We can see that the NPC draw distance is very far. That's fantastic. I'm glad to see that. One of my concerns was that, again, the Switch 2 version would just be a copy and pasted version of the Switch version, and the Switch version needs to have performance considerations. So the draw distance on the Switch version very likely will be much less than this, and that's for performance considerations. The Switch is not as strong as the Switch 2. I was worried they were just going to copy and paste it and let the game run at a higher resolution. Seeing NPCs at this distance tells me that the developers have made considerations for that, and they should make more use of the Switch 2's processing power. I'm very glad to see that. This is heartening. I'm so amped from seeing that. So very cool. Very cool. I just want to take a quick step back to 42 seconds here just to enjoy a little bit of some existential dread. This woman here is talking to a hologram of her dead husband. The hologram was programmed while her husband was still alive, but she just can't let him go. It's been 7 months. It's been a difficult time for her. She hasn't been really able to process it. But lady, you've got to let him go. You've got to put the hologram away. Your husband is gone. The hologram is not a replacement for him. And it's not healthy. It's not healthy to have holograms made of your loved ones posthumously. It's not good. It's not good for you mentally, emotionally, psychologically. It's going to harm your existing relationships. Let it go. You've got to let it. You've got to move forward in a positive way. Here we see the use of something called a splat map to create the detail of this, which I believe would be a ring. In game development, we use a splat map, and no, A splat map is not short for a stage in Splatoon. Those are different. A splat map basically lets us define how we want textures to look by using one lower resolution texture. We can sort of draw on that, just one color, two color, three colors. We won't use the textures on the splat map. And the splat map tells a piece of geometry, use other higher resolution textures now. You can tile them, which means you're repeating them so that you can use a number of smaller resolution textures as opposed to using one giant massive texture. If this were to be one texture, this whole thing, it would be unreasonably large. It would be like an 8K texture and it still wouldn't be detailed enough for that. So you can use a 1024 by 1024 texture, or 2048 by 2048, and a lower resolution texture to create that. So you're using a number of smaller textures that are all used in different ways, tiled in a way that is efficient, and you can create more detailed environments from smaller textures. So that's one technique we use as developers, but it's also easier to manage by painting a splat map. And those are tools that we have built into our game engines. Really fantastic here. The shadows, they're being rendered pretty decent. I would say that kind of looks like they're about 60 to 70. That looks to be about 60 or 70 meters away. It's hard to see if that one's rendering a shadow as well. Who knows? We are also using verticality here to create somewhat of an interesting scene. We have the mountains in the background and that moving just there. And we have some reflectiveness on the tiles here, which catches the light in an interesting way. It just makes it a little more interesting. We make use of verticality here to make sure that the scenes are not very dull to look at. There are certain angles and certain scenes that look dull because it's impossible to predict every single angle through which the player will view the game. But overall, they've made good use of verticality here. Buildings of varying heights and varying angles. They're not all facing the exact same direction. Something they've considered, the developers, the artists understand they have to use green. It's all they have to break up the environment. And they've used it in an interesting way. We have these green belts here, trees that come up, and it's a good use of trees to break up the dullness of the buildings, because the buildings are very dull. They are the weak point of this game overall. They're just so dull looking. The trees break that up. They really could be using more trees. I think they should be using more. And you can see the shadows are being rendered quite far, but that's because the building shadows are baked. Now this tells me that there will not be a real-time time of day system. So far from what we've seen, we've only seen 3 times of day, and the sun, the light source, always looks like it's coming from the exact same position. So I do not believe this will have a real-time time of day system the way that Scarlet and Violet has. We will have midday, this looks like noon. We will have sunset and night. And that is because the shadows are baked. The baking of the building shadows has to occur during the development process. So let's see here. My notes here. Now I believe this looks really good. And okay, so you might look at this and say, oh, this looks bad, it's so plain. It's empty, right? There could be planter boxes. There could be other things here. This looks so plain in terms of detail placement, right? You could be populating this more, but the use of textures is excellent. This is excellent use of textures. This is not even, Scarlet and Violet are not even on the same level as this. What is so good about this, it is very hard to tell where the textures, where the tiles are repeating. I can only identify a repetition of pattern in one area. So here, if you take a look at these 2 bricks that are lighter colored, and then we have this shape here, that is repeated here, here. I can identify that there. And if you want to try and find that pattern, and you can identify it and find it somewhere else, then let me know in the comments. But that is excellent, that it is so hard to tell where the textures are tiling, even along these trim tiles here, it's very hard to tell where they are repeating textures. There are two ways to achieve this. You can use a shader that has some sort of advanced processing. There's some sort of stochastic techniques that you can use, other approaches where you can hide the tiling by taking patches of other tiles and then placing them atop tiles in a way that is processed real time in engine, and then that hides the tiling. When you see tiling, it looks bad. It always looks bad because it makes things look inorganic and it makes them look artificial, like they were created in a game. And we all know that this is created in a game, but we do not want to feel that. We want to feel like this is an immersive world into which we can suspend our disbelief and just enjoy pretending being in this fantasy world for a while before we have to go back home to where our parents are fighting. And if you're not even sure if your dad's going to sign the divorce papers or not, no one wants to have to think about that. They want to just play a game and enjoy for a little bit. All right? We don't want to have to think about our parents getting divorced. Even though it's for the best, it's for the better, and they'd both be better off if it happened, but they should just do it, get over with. So having tiling in a game reminds us of that. It reminds us. So having this technique where they've hidden the tiling, I look at this, it's so hard to tell on this asphalt where they've tiled. If you look at Sword and Shield or Scarlet and Violet, boot up Scarlet and Violet right now, walk around any outdoor area, you will see the tiling immediately. I know I'm harping on about this, but I'm so impressed at this. This is brilliant. This is not something that I expected Game Freak to pay that much attention to, but I cannot stress enough how much effort they put into hiding the tiling. This is very well done. Subarashi. Well done. Okay. Something I don't like about this is quite plain. This is one of the weaker scenes that they've composed. I really don't like that we have this sort of green outside and then our attention is pulled away from everything else in the scene and we look there because it's vibrant, it's eye-catching. Our eyes are drawn to the color green. Compositionally, if you were to frame this as framing a shot in a film or taking a photo, this is weak. This is very weak. And I don't want to keep comparing this to other games, but there are other monster catching games where the demo just came out and you can play it, where they would have placed things in the scene. They would have matched that color tone and placed it in the scene to draw your attention back and even out your focus and allow your eyes to be drawn to the point of focus. This is a photographic philosophy here. Even making the teapot green, matching the same color tone as that, putting a poster on the wall that has the same color tone as that would pull your attention back into the middle of the scene to where you should be looking, which is around here. These are things that don't necessarily matter, but to me it tells me that this is not, that whoever's composing these particular scenes does not yet have a higher level of understanding when it comes to scene composition and visual communication. But I'm not saying they've done a bad job. I'm just saying that there's still room for improvement, and they should bring photographers on board, I would say. Let's see here. I like the use of verticality to avoid monotony here. They've used the smokestacks. If they didn't have the smokestacks, it would look very plain, but that's the use of verticality. Again, they're breaking up that visual line. That's a breakup there. The tree in the distance, that's a very high resolution tree. That's a high quality asset, and you'll see that it still has wind simulation. A little hard to tell, but that's got wind simulation. So I'm impressed. Normally, I would expect them to replace this with a level of detail. LODs is a technique we use in games that when objects are farther from the camera, we use a lower quality version of the asset. You see it everywhere in gaming. It's extremely important because every object has a rendering cost. Trees are pretty expensive, believe it or not, to render. And so we would usually have that be a cardboard cutout, or what we call a billboard. And it's basically no longer a mesh geometry. It's no longer a 3D model. It becomes a flat billboard that has a picture of a tree on it, and it looks like a tree still. That does not look like a billboard to me, which tells me that they're sort of flaunting the Switch 2's power a little bit to say, we don't need billboards no more, man. Which means their billboard distance probably starts way, way, way farther away. So let's go here. Machop is doing, he's practicing his horse stance. That's a martial arts thing. That, you know what? If you're concerned about your quads being not strong enough, you do that. Oh, shoot, man. Yeah, you practice your horse stance, you hold that. Dang, you'll have quads like you wouldn't believe. You'll walk down the street and all the old ladies will be batting their eyes at you. I do like the detail of these stacked chairs here. It looks like there's some chairs upside down. Nice signs. I really just like small detail like that. Just, you know, in-world detail and in-world logic, internal logic. I like that. Here we've got a ball check. We have ball check. We have Pokeball. We have Premier Ball, which is my favorite one after the Luxury Ball. Tied in first place for me, I think. And Great Ball, which I thought I had a Great Ball, but apparently I didn't buy one, which matches the way that I play the games. I never buy Great Balls. Why? Why would I buy a Great Ball? Someone's going to give me 10 of them when I beat them anyway in a battle. I'm going to look in a trash can. I'm going to get 2 of them, so why should I buy Great Ball? So I don't buy them in the games, and it looks like I didn't buy one in real life. Let's see here. Now the grass is very different from Scarlet and Violet, and I am so glad to see that. And I think this even looks quite a bit different from earlier trailers, and I'm glad that they've chosen this aesthetic as well, because it's more coherent. In Scarlet and Violet, it kind of, I mean, it's basically a triangle, right? Well, yeah. No, it's a, well, they're not, they're rhombuses? I think is a geometrist? Is a geometrist a job? I was gonna, well, you have geologists that study geology, so a geometrist would study geometry. So I'm sure there's a geometrist out there that's going to be pretty upset that I can't describe the shape of a blade of grass in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but they're rhombuses like that, right? It's basically 4 sides, and it's very distracting to me when I see that because it looks like it came out of a video game, and I don't want to feel like I'm playing a video game. I don't want to, again, I don't want the immersion to be broken. This is much more immersive. It's much more expressive. It's interesting to look at. It's way more expressive in terms of saying, this is grass. If I look at that, subconsciously, I will think, yeah, that's grass. That's grass. I like that it tapers down. There's a little bit of a gradient, and it looks like it's actually growing out of the ground. If you look at Scarlet and Violet, it's a rhombus. It's a rectangle. It's basically no. That's not the definition of a rectangle. All the angles have to be 90. It's a rhombus or whatever. You know, it's a polygon. In Scarlet and Violet, it looks like a polygon just sticking out of the ground, and it's always immersion breaking to me, and I have to like fight myself in Scarlet and Violet and just tell myself, just believe it's grass, just believe it. In this, subconsciously, I look at it and my brain goes, yeah, that's nice looking grass. So I'm so glad that they've changed the aesthetic and they've gone with something that's more expressive and interesting. This won't have the same kind of interactivity as the grass that we see in Scarlet and Violet, though. The reason why it looks that way in Scarlet and Violet is for interactivity. You got to walk through it. I think that's going to be less interactive. Oh, ball check, Pokeball. Now there's a funny detail here. Have a look at this Pokeball in her hand. I'm going to zoom on in here, right? Just give me a second here. We're going to zoom on in. There's just a funny detail that I noticed. Watch the Pokeball in her hand. It rotates in her hand. Watch it. Hold on. Here we go. There. See at that final position, you see the ball rotating in her hand? Just free spinning. Why is it doing that? It rotates in her hand. Why does that happen? That's so weird. I don't know why it does that, but yeah, I don't know. It's a funny quirk. Who knows? Who knows why that's happening? But I like catching things like that, not to complain, but it's fun. It's fun to catch those things. It's a game. Stuff like that's going to happen. I really like the internal logic here when it comes to environmental design. You have these storm drains you know, they don't have to put those there, but it's just internal logic. You know, there should be storm drains. There's a manhole cover, and I'm just realizing what an unpleasant word manhole is, and I would like there to be a different word for that. Like a manhole cover already. I just don't like the sound of that. We have Ghost Gal here. Now, I like these details. See, these sort of neon things, the holographic signs that communicate, that indicate something. They should have used more of this to populate more detail on the buildings. If there were more buildings that had more signage, it would make them look lively. It would make the environment look lived in. It would be more interesting. There'd be more color, and there wouldn't be such a concern over the dull, drab, gray environments if we had these more signage. It's a shame that they didn't lean into that from a design perspective. Let's see here. Now I want to discuss something that's just so technical here. This looks dull. To me, this does not look good. Having such a dull, harsh border between the mountains and the sky, but there's basically nothing they can do about it. So I'm not criticizing or complaining. I want to explain why this is so difficult to deal with. Now, during the daytime and during sunset time, it looked fantastic. And the reason why it looked fantastic was because there's that visual effect called bloom, and bloom was handling all the heavy lifting. It added a halo, it blurred that boundary between the sky and land, and it looked interesting. But bloom only works if you have a bright pixel that's very bright, and it's right next to a dark pixel. We don't have that. And the reason why there's really nothing the developers can do about it is because they would have to adjust the bloom sensitivity in order to have that bloom halo effect on that border there. You can see bloom effect on the lamp here. Now, if they were to adjust the bloom sensitivity to have that haloing effect here, it would make this blown out, and it would make it basically look like a blinding spotlight. It would look like a massive lighthouse, and it would be blinding. It would be so bright. There'd be a massive halo on there because they've turned up the sensitivity. And it's a shame that we can't get that to look a bit better. I'm sure people aren't going to care, but as an artist, it's that sort of discrepancy that is a little jarring to me, because in other times of day, it looks fantastic. That's why I'm noticing it. If it looked flat and dull like that throughout the whole game, then I wouldn't care. I wouldn't notice. But the fact that it looks fantastic during the daytime and fantastic during sunset time, that's why I'm noticing it. Otherwise, I wouldn't even care. So there's something interesting here. The trailer is generally in Japanese, but here it's in Spanish. Let me just get out of the way, and you can... here we have Barrera Espinosa. I think I went to school with a Barrera Espinosa. It's a stupid joke. It doesn't make any sense. It's so dumb. Okay, and then we have English. So I don't know if this is just a small Easter egg, but you know, it's like all different cultures around the world battling each other. Neato. But yeah, this one's in English for a split second. And then in 27, we are back to Japanese. Let's see if there's other. Now I'm noticing ambient occlusion under foot here, and it's just a real-time processing effect. It's a post-screen effect where one piece of geometry intersects another, and it sort of adds a darker shadow in between. It just adds more dynamic contrast. It's just interesting to look at. Yeah, I just noticed it. You can tell because it's a darker shadow than the shadows that are being here. And I think this building shadow, I think that is baked. We can see the real-time shadows are quite soft and hard to see on the characters there. Something I noticed here. These traffic cones are bad. Let me get out of the way. And I'm not complaining. I'm not saying they've done a bad job. I'm saying internal logic would say that cones should be visible. In the real world, we have orange cones because they are easy to see and they stand out, and these blend in. So I'm not saying the developers did a bad job. I'm saying in lore here, in the lore of this, these are terrible cones. These are not good. Someone needs to repaint those. That's not good. Oh yeah, that what is up with Delphox, dude? This is the dirtiest look I've ever seen from anyone. That is such a dirty look. Look at that. That makes me laugh. That is hilarious. That look is funny. The dirtiest look. How That's funny. I don't know why that makes me laugh so much. So something I've noticed about megas in this game, it took me a while to actually really notice it, is every single mega has a rim lighting effect on their shader, and it has this prismatic look to it where the color values keep shifting. I really think that's neat. But the problem is with this rim lighting effect is you don't really have that much control. Now, depending on how oblique a polygon is when compared to the camera, you'll have more of that rim lighting effect. So sometimes it's overpowering. Sometimes you get too much. And this is something that it's an issue that I face with my games that I'm working on, especially the one that I'm developing right now, Goo Buddies, as I rely on rim lighting. And when a character is quadrupedal and they're flat like that, you see the overpowering effect that I'm talking about here. You get too much of that haloing effect, too much of that lighting. You notice it on Delphox at some point as well, and it's something you just have to accept and deal with. Is that if you're going to have the rim lighting effect, you don't necessarily have that much control over it. For example, like you see, it's way overpowering on these parts of the body, even though you wouldn't necessarily want them to be. It just depends on the oblique angles. You see a lot of it here underneath Camerupt. That's just how it is, you know. Oh, something I forgot to point out here, and this is quite noticeable. We haven't really seen this much before, but we have palm trees here. So the palm trees indicate that Alola remakes are coming next. That is confirmed. That's confirmation right there. Okay, we'll just skip a bunch of stuff and go farther ahead here. Ball check, Pokeball. And this is a scene that is very dull. This is the worst shot by far that we've ever seen in any of the trailers. There's a lack of detail on the rooftop here, which is not something we've seen, you know, and there are no smokestacks here. You see the tiling on the rooftop, you see the tiling on the buildings. There are no smokestacks, there's nothing interesting, and you can see these harsh visual lines, and this is when I say break the line. They haven't broken the line here, and do you see how plain this looks? They could have just taken more smokestacks, stick them on top, break the visual line, put something up there, put trees on there. We've seen other rooftops that have trees growing on them, benches, so perhaps this area is not finished. This is, or maybe this is the border of the city, I don't know. But this is by far the worst shot that we've seen. I thought everything else looks fine. So this is an area that tells me they have not spent that much time on this particular area. Here we have 4 out of 6. So 4 of these Pokemon have Mega Forms, which confirms Half-Life 4. Half-Life 4 is confirmed. Here in this battle, we have Barack Obama Snow performing an ice attack, and he is about to OHKO these guys right here. That guy's getting, Trevenant's getting OHKO'd, you know. It's good night. That's a big old ice attack, I think. Here, this guy needs cataract surgery. That's not good. He's left it a little too long. Not good. Your eyes shouldn't be like that. And here we get to see some of the older mega forms that were introduced in X and Y. Really, really great to see these guys. I'll get out of the way so we can just enjoy these. These are neat. So neat. Real cool. Great to see them in new games again after they had been sort of exiled. My son, my beautiful boy, Mega Beedrill is back. I'm very happy to see Mega Beedrill again. Very cool. I just like that main Nectric is this big, honking, thick lightning bolt. Really fantastic. We that went by real fast, didn't it? That went by. It got Barack Obama snow. I like seeing that. Dragon Fairy, the only Dragon Fairy type. We should have more. Mega Sizer, get out of here, dude. Nobody needs you, all right? No one needs your nonsense. Get out of here. That is a chunky Mega Gyarados is a chunky boy, I'll say that. Oh wow. So I just want to ask if you're still here and you're still hanging out. Hey, thanks for wow, this is a long video. Holy crap. Let me know in the comments if you have Eternal Floette in X and Y. I know some of you have Eternal Floette. I'll admit it. I got Eternal Floette unofficially. I want it. I wanted to see all the cool stuff, man. Yeah. Look, this is great. The level of detail on the trees it goes really far. I'm really impressed. There are a number of things that just really impress me here. There are some things that I would like to see further improvement on, but this is a huge step in the right direction for Game Freak, for Pokemon. I'm very impressed. I'm so glad to see this. I'll put the link in the description if you want to watch the original video to this. This has been such a long video. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate you spending some time with me here. All right, let's look forward to some great games. October is going to be a fantastic month for monster raising games. We got 2 real great ones coming up soon. Take care, everyone. Be well.